Welcome to Montage Microchurch Network, where we are making disciples by loving Jesus and loving people. This series will explore the letters Paul wrote to churches while he was in prison: Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, and Colossians. Join us while we wrestle with and apply these amazing letters to our lives.
Well, we made it. We walked through the entire book of Philippians together, and I've loved every single minute of this series. We started with Paul's prayer that our love would abound more and more. We moved through suffering and humility and working out our salvation and shining like lights. We talked about pressing forward and letting go of the past. And then last week, we camped out in the peace that passes understanding. It has been a phenomenal journey through one of the most joy-filled letters ever written, from a man sitting in a prison cell. And now we land. Paul closes this letter the way that he's lived the whole thing, with gratitude, with generosity, and with a contentment that makes absolutely no sense given his circumstances. Right? He's still in prison. Nothing has changed externally for him, and yet he writes these closing verses with more peace and joy than most of us feel on our best days. I want to understand how he got there, because whatever Paul found, man, I want that. And I think you probably do too. Well, the Philippian church had sent Paul a financial gift through Epaphroditus. We talked about Epaphroditus back in chapter 2, right? The guy who nearly died in service to Paul. Well, that gift was a genuine act of love and sacrifice from a church that had been supporting Paul since the very beginning of his ministry. And Paul wants to close his letter by acknowledging it with the deepest gratitude, but I love it because it's in a way that points everything back to Jesus rather than to the gift itself. And what he says in these closing verses is one of the most countercultural things in the entire letter. In verses 10 through 13, Paul says, "Not that I was ever in need, for I have learned how to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I have learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it's with a full stomach or empty, with plenty or with little. For I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength." Now I want to start with something that I think is really easy to miss here. Paul says he learned how to be content. He didn't say he was born content, or that contentment came naturally to him, or that he just had a personality type that made it easy. No, he says he learned it, which means contentment is not something you either have or don't have. It's something you grow into through real life experience with Jesus. And that's really good news for those of us who are still very much in the learning process. And look at the range of situations Paul's describing. Almost nothing or everything, full stomach or empty, plenty or little. He's not talking about learning to be content in comfortable circumstances while struggling when things get hard. He's talking about being content in all of it, in the seasons of abundance and in the seasons where you're not sure how the bills are getting paid. That's a different kind of contentment than our culture tries to sell us. Because our culture's version of contentment is essentially get more stuff and you'll eventually feel like you have enough. Get that bigger house or that newer truck or the next promotion or the better version of whatever you currently have, and then you finally will be content. And we all know how that really goes, right? The bar just keeps moving, and there's always something else to want. Man, I've been there. Chasing the next thing that convinced that when I get it, it's gonna be better and I'm gonna finally feel settled. And then you get there and immediately you're looking around for the next thing. It's exhausting and it's literally never ending. But Paul found something different. And then he dropped verse 13, which was one of the most quoted verses in the entire Bible and one of the most misunderstood. "I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength." You've probably seen that on a coffee mug or a motivational poster, or maybe even a football player's eye black. And right, there's nothing wrong with that, but the context matters. Paul's not saying Jesus will help you win the championship or get the promotion or accomplish your dreams. He's saying that Jesus gives him the strength to be content in every single situation, in the plenty and in the need, in the winning the championship and in the losing the championship, right? The strength that Paul's talking about is the strength to not need anything more than Jesus. And that's a very different kind of strength than what most people are claiming when they quote that verse. An anonymous person said that contentment is not the fulfillment of what you want, but the realization of how much you already have. And that cuts right to the heart of what Paul's describing. Contentment, it's not about getting to a certain level of comfort or security. It's not getting the house with the 2-car garage and the white picket fence and the dandelion-free lawn. It's about actually seeing what you already have. And more than that, actually seeing who you already have, right? When Jesus is enough, you are free in a way that nothing this world can touch. And Paul is doing something really thoughtful here, right? He's thanking the Philippians for their gift, genuinely and warmly, but he's careful to frame it in a way that protects them from thinking that they are doing Paul a favor. He says, I don't say this because I want a gift from you. Rather, I want you to receive a reward for your kindness. Right? In other words, I'm not bringing this up because I need more money from you. I'm bringing it up because I want you to understand what your generosity is doing for you. I want you to receive the reward from this. That is a kingdom way of thinking about money and generosity that's completely upside down from how our culture thinks about it. We tend to think of giving as something that costs us, right? You have less because you gave some away. What Paul is saying is actually an investment in your own spiritual account. Your giving and your generosity produces fruit that increases your heavenly credit, right? It's not a sacrifice that leaves you with less. It's a seed that produces a harvest. I think about the most generous people I've known in my life, and really without exception, they are also some of the most joyful, most free, most content people I've ever been around. There's something about holding money and possessions just loosely, about being genuinely willing to give, that breaks the power those things have over you. Generosity is one of the most practical ways to work out your salvation in real life. It's putting your money where your theology is. And he goes further in verse 18 and 19. He says, and this same God who takes care of me will supply all your needs from his glorious riches, which has been given to us in Christ Jesus. And this verse also gets quoted a lot in the context of financial blessing. And I understand why. I mean, it's a beautiful promise, really. But again, context matters so much here. That's why we work through the Bible verse by verse. Paul's not writing a blank check for whatever you happen to want. He's writing to a church that had been extraordinarily generous, that had given sacrificially to support his ministry. And he's saying to them, right, the same God you have been trusting with your resources, he's going to take care of you. You gave out of your need and your trust, and God sees that. He will supply what you need from riches that make anything you gave look small by comparison. Right? That is a promise rooted in relationship and trust and obedience. Not some sort of vending machine theology where you put in the right amount and get out what you want. Paul has learned that God's provision, it's real and personal and sufficient. He knows this from experience, right? He's been on almost nothing, and he has been in abundance. And in both places, Jesus shows up for him. And that is the testimony he's closing this letter with. And I want to say something about this that I think matters for us at Montage specifically, right? We're not a big church with this big budget. We're a micro church family that does life together and trusts Jesus together. And I genuinely believe that the posture of generosity and open-handedness, giving what we have, trusting Jesus with the rest, is one of the most powerful ways we can live out everything we have talked about in this series. Holding things loosely, giving generously, trusting Jesus completely, trusting that he will take care of what we need. So I really do. I implore you to give to Montage and to give to missionaries and to give to those in need. Because by doing so, you're investing not only in them, but in your own spiritual growth and in your own blessing. Amy Carmichael says, you can give without loving, but you cannot love without giving. So love God and love people by giving generously. And here's where I want to land, both this message and really this whole series through Philippians. Paul wrote this letter from a prison cell. He had no guarantee of what tomorrow looked like. He had people fighting in his churches, and he had enemies attacking his message, and he had a body that was beaten and broken and worn out. And from that place, he wrote one of the most joy-filled documents in human history. How? Because he had learned the secret. Not the secret of how to win in the stock market, or how to get more, or how to make life easier, or how to avoid suffering, or how to lose 30 pounds in the next 30 days. No, he learned the secret of contentment. The secret of finding in Jesus everything you actually need in every single situation, whether you have plenty or almost nothing. The secret of pressing forward rather than looking back. The secret of shining like lights because you belong to a different kingdom. The secret of humility and genuine love for others. The secret of peace that passes understanding when you actually pray instead of worrying. And all of these are found in Jesus. And that is what Philippians is. It's not a set of principles to apply. It's a portrait of what a life fully given to Jesus actually looks like in the real world. And that life is available to every single one of us in Montage. Not once we've gotten our act together, not when the circumstances improve, but right now, because Jesus is alive and Jesus is near and Jesus really is enough. He's more than enough. Like, we are the church and we gather together. We press forward together. We shine like lights together in our valley. And the same God who supplied Paul's every need from his glorious riches in Christ Jesus, that same God is with us. What a phenomenal thing to get to be a part of. I just want to say thank you for walking through this book of Philippians with me. And I pray and I hope that it has challenged your joy and the way you found your life and on whom you found your life. So our 3 questions to kind of wrap up this series together. Number 1, Paul says he learned contentment. So where are you in that learning process right now? I would encourage you to take some time each day this week to thank God for all you do have. Number 2, Paul says it is a blessing to be generous. Well, would others say you're a generous person? Well, what's one idea that would help you grow in generosity? And 3, we've walked through the whole book of Philippians together, looking back over this whole series. Humility, working out your salvation, pressing forward, peace, contentment. I want to know what the one thing that Jesus has been saying to you most consistently throughout this book. And what is one real specific step that you are going to take to actually live differently because of the book of Philippians. I love you guys. We are on to the next book, Colossians, next week. We'll read the whole thing together and then we'll work through it and start a whole new series after all of the prison letters of Paul. I love you guys. Let's go be joyful, joy-filled because of Christ.
Thank you for watching. If you would like more content, to connect with us, or to explore more of who we are as a network, visit montagemicro.church.